Unfortunately, I will have to do this in English. My French is good enough to count to 10. And, unless you want to play hide and seek, that's kind of, we'll have to do this in English. I was very fortunate for Laurent to help me translate all the slides to French, so hopefully that's going to make more sense. Is this projector now? Come on. Good. Okay. So, what I want to talk to you today about is how can we get our organizations to actually benefit from flexibility. Many software organizations suffer horribly by trying to create flexible scope. And a lot of times unexpected things are problems for companies, not something we can benefit from. And this is where unexpected things happen all the time, yes. So unexpected things happen and companies kind of suffer from that. We have to react, we have to replan, we have to kind of suffer from doing that. And instead, what we can do is we can help our organizations turn that into a competitive advantage. That's the benefit of Agile, where most organizations actually do not do that. Almost all software organizations I work with as a consultant, business people do not want flexibility. Business people want to give a list of features that's this big. They want it done. They don't care about how software people do that. And we have to fight them to do it in an agile way. Forrester Research published this fantastic paper about a year and a half ago where they talk about how companies actually adopt Agile. And they say that by far the most popular Agile process out there is Water Scrum Fall, where all the business decisions are made up front. Then you children can go and play Scrum as much as you want. And then at the end, we will let the software marinate a bit and improve. And when the bouquet improves, we'll kind of take it live. And that's a big problem because in such a case, the organization isn't really benefiting from the fact that the team can do a 2-week iteration. I've worked with a software organization in Germany where they were trying to figure out how to improve their requirements process, and they said, we do Scrum by the book. And I said, well, there are multiple books, which one? And well, we do retrospectives, we do daily stand-ups, we do 2-week iterations, we do a Scrum board, we have a done column, everything is great. And so, well, why have you called me? I'm a consultant. I generally don't go to companies where everything is great. I said, well, things are a bit slow. So, okay, let's look at this. And the first question I asked is, does your software go live at the end of every sprint? I said, oh, no, of course not. Okay. What happens after the sprint? Well, another sprint. Okay. What happens after that? Well, another sprint. Okay. Is there a larger cycle or something? Oh yeah, of course there is a tact. And I said, I've read lots of Scrum books. I've never read anything that talks about tacts. So what is a tact? And they said, well, a tact is for sprints. Okay. Does your software go live at the end of a tact? No, of course not. So what happens in the end of a tact? Well, another development tact. Okay, a development tact. Is there some other? Here there's a testing tact as well. So we have 2 development tacts and a testing tact, and then the software is ready to go live. So their actual iteration is about 6 months, not 2 weeks. And when we looked at the requirement system, because these guys are Germans, everything has a timestamp, everything is tracked, everything is very precise. We looked at the requirement system, and the average time from when the business approved for software people to start working on something until it goes live was about a year and a half. So in that case, the fact that the team can do a 2-week iteration is completely irrelevant. Completely irrelevant. And that's a really interesting factor, because now we have improved as an industry quite a lot over the last 10, 15 years. We are much more capable. You guys are capable of doing 2-week iterations, 3-week iterations, 5 iterations a day. I don't know, kind of small iterations. But I can bet that the large majority of people in this room, their organizations do not actually benefit from that. So the big question in my mind is, why are organizations so bad at working with flexible scope? What is it about flexible scope that scares people so much? For example, I worked with a company where I took over a project that was about a year and a half late. And at this point, they had only about 1 month to deliver. There was so much scope there that it was incredible. Somebody spent a lot of time detailing all those things. They tried to kind of do it in lots of different ways. And about a month before the final deadline, everybody started panicking. When everybody started panicking, really senior people got into the room and said, oh shit, what do we do now? And we were able to talk to really, really important people. We were able to kind of look at the next year of scope that they still had to do. We were able to delete 90% of that. We were able to come up with a completely different solution and then go live in 3 weeks and solve the problem. Now, the question in my mind was, why have these people wasted a year and a half of their lives where 3 weeks of development was all that actually was required? Because they threw away everything that was developed by then. They implemented a much simpler solution in 3 weeks. They went live, everybody happy. And why do people accept that in a moment of crisis, where when everything is working okay, we don't want that, and people want a big list of requirements? And it's a very, very interesting thing, because generally, I think that's a problem we only have in software. In all the other industries, people actually want flexibility. People pay for flexibility. If you look at Eurostar, flexible ticket costs a lot more than a non-flexible ticket. Kind of, if you can commit to something, it costs you less. If you go to a hotel and you pay up front, you commit to something, it costs less. If you want to keep your options open, that costs more. It's only in software where flexible stuff costs less, because we can deliver it easier, but at the same time, people fight us on that, which is completely insane. So, from a perspective of being able to deliver in short iterations as a capability, and not doing that because kind of organizations want to run water scrum fog, I think the first thing that is really, really challenging for us as an industry is that kind of, if the scope we're working with is not flexible, the organization does not benefit from the team being able to do agile development. There's no benefit for the organization. There's some technical benefit for the team, but the organization overall, there is no benefit. And that's why business people do not care about agile. They pay lip service, they talk about, oh, we need to be agile, we need to be lean startup, we need to be this and that, but then at the end of the day, everybody wants 500 user stories delivered in the exact sequence that they want to deliver. So that's a big problem. So how do we, if we can solve this problem, and this is my challenge to you as the Agile community of Bordeaux, if you can solve this problem for your company, you will get a lot of benefits for the company. The organization will start benefiting from the team being able to do Agile. And I've worked with several organizations over the last 5 or 6 years that have solved this problem, and they have turned unexpected problems into a competitive advantage. When something unexpected happens in the market, we kind of can be much, much better than our competition. So the problem with flexible scope is flexible scope scares people. Flexible scope does not allow business people to say, oh, I don't know how much it's going to cost and when is it going to be delivered, and I don't know what I'm going to measure and things like that, and that scares people. At the same time, being able to deliver flexible stuff is very, very beneficial. And again, this is not a problem that's particularly only in the software industry. Other industries had this problem, but they solved it. And what I want to give you today is a couple of ideas that we found in other industries, how they solve that problem. I've done a lot of research on projects that were delivered with kind of self-organizing teams, with good customer involvement, with flexible planning, because that's what kind of Agile is all about. One of the principles says customer collaboration over contracts and things like that. So instead of kind of having a list of 5 million user stories, how do we negotiate effectively and kind of self-organize? And I found some really, really interesting projects from history. How far do you think we need to go in history to find kind of the first true Agile project where the product owner was involved on a daily basis, they were changing the plan, it was flexible, the team organized well, and kind of they shipped the product on time and budget? How far do we need to go back in history? So I found a project that was done in 1628. This was a big government project. So government projects today are kind of famous for not being agile, because the only requirement government projects have is not to be in the news. You never have to deliver anything as long as you're not in the news. And kind of these people actually wanted to deliver something important. So this was a project done in Sweden. And in 1628, Sweden was just becoming a big power in Europe. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to do something that's going to really put Sweden on the map and make everybody in Europe scared of Sweden. And what they wanted to do is, because kind of naval power was everything in 1628, they wanted to have something that's going to make Sweden the biggest naval power in Europe. The product owner in this case was the king. In many, many cases with government projects today, a product owner is just a proxy to a proxy to a proxy to a proxy to a proxy, and nobody can actually make any decisions. In this case, the product owner was the actual owner of the country. In 1628, the king pretty much owned everything. So he was the ultimate decision maker, he was involved in the project day to day, and what they were going to do is they were going to build this massive, massive ship that's going to scare everybody. This was a really interesting time in terms of technology, because in 1628, cannons were just becoming small enough so you can put them on a ship. Before that, ships were pretty much built for on-premise deployment. You put lots of Marines on the ship, you ram a ship into another ship, Marines jump over, kill everybody, game over. In 1600s, it was just becoming possible to do cloud deployments. You put cannons on a ship, you just come close, and then you shoot. And the king couldn't really decide if he wanted a cloud deployment solution or an on-premise solution. So he was changing the plan all the time. One day he would come and say, I want a wider ship to put more cannons. And then the designers would have to kind of start expanding the ship. Then he would come, no. Fast ship, Marines jump over. Then they start narrowing down the ship. And one day he came and said, I think it's much better if we actually reuse this material and create 2 small ships. So they started taking apart the big ship and creating 2 small ships. Then a month later he came in and said, no, I changed my mind. 1 big ship again. So the project is actually famous for being delivered on time and budget. It was delivered on time, on budget, and they've created something amazing. They've created this massive, fantastic ship that you can even see today in the museum. It's absolutely amazing, because despite all that kind of product owner changing the plan all the time, they shipped it on time and on budget. And we can learn so much from this project. Because after it was shipped, literally, this is a ship, so it's shipped. After it was shipped for about 1.5 kilometers and then turned over and sank. Because 2 days before it was supposed to ship, the king came and said, more cannons! And then they put more cannons on the top, and the ship was unstable. So, although this was shipped on time and budget, it only shipped for about 1.5 kilometers and then sank in the cold seas of Sweden, where even today we can see it is preserved for us to observe in the Vasa Museum. So it's an absolutely fantastic story of what happens when people basically just listen to product owners all the time. So, flexible scope is great, but we as software professionals have to be more responsible than just listening to everything that happens. And on the other end of kind of the spectrum, you know, some organizations do want a Scrum fall, some organizations that I've worked with have this stream of consciousness where anybody can suggest anything and everything is a good idea and people just deliver a ton of crap all the time. And at the end of the day, everybody's angry. Business people think nothing really comes out, or they think it's the software team's error that kind of the ship sank 1.5 kilometers later. And it actually is, because we need to be better professionals. So, kind of, the key lesson to take from this is that flexible scope is dangerous. Flexible scope is dangerous in particular when there is no big picture. Unless we have a big picture to work against, unless we know what we want to achieve, flexible scope tends to be very dangerous. Now, for a lot of organizations, this is where the problems start, because with agile planning and with kind of flexible planning, most people understand that as losing the big picture completely. And what people tend to create are lots and lots of very small user stories that people put in Jira. And I really love the fact that kind of Jira is an issue tracking system, because by the point you have 300 user stories in Jira, you actually have a big issue. That's a big problem now. So, kind of, there's kind of two opposite sides of the story here. We have what is Scrum fall on one end, we have the user story stream of consciousness on the other end, and this is what makes business people scared of flexible scope. At the same time, business people fully understand that unexpected things happen all the time. Especially on a longer project, unexpected things will happen all the time. Not just in software, world in general. For example, there was an absolutely fantastic offer on eBay that came out a couple of months ago. So it only appeared for 2 days, and it was kind of, the bid was finished in 2 days. It was for a Soviet Tupolev Tu-95MS strategic bomber. The conditions of sale were amazing. It was used, and the expected price is $3 million, the payment is cash in person. And the only trick with this was that you had to pick it up in Ukraine. So, something unexpected happened, and you know, the original owners were coming back for this. So whoever owned this had to unload it on eBay really, really quickly. So unexpected things like that happen all the time. You know, we have something that our competition does, or something that the government does, or something that the Russians do, that now causes a big problem, or creates a big business opportunity. And if we can plan flexibly, we can kind of use a big business opportunity. If we cannot plan flexibly, if the average time from a requirement to live is 1.5 years, then pretty much all the unexpected things that happen in the world are going to hit us negatively. So, my challenge to you today is, when something like this happens in your business, how do we turn this into a competitive advantage? How do we turn this into something that allows us to outrun the competition? And this is kind of a really interesting thing, because that happens all the time in software. For example, I'm working on a collaboration tool at the moment, and our business strategy was to offer a single user version for free, but multi-user collaboration we were going to charge. And it would take us about 4 months to properly do the multi-user thing. We were going to release it iteratively, but it's going to take us about 4 months to do multi-user thing. About 1 month after we started, pretty much this happened. Google released a real-time API for free. which meant that anybody in the world could implement real-time collaboration for their software on Google architecture, which honestly is going to be better than what we do, and you can do it for free. So, kind of that invalidated our business plan completely. Now, what we could have done is we could have kept delivering the user stories we planned and wasted 3 months of our lives, or we could have realized, hey, something unexpected happened, let's turn that into a competitive advantage. If anybody can offer real-time collaboration for free, we will be the first to do that. And we were one of the first to launch on this new platform, and because Google is paying for the whole thing, it doesn't cost us anything, we could offer real-time collaboration for free. And most of the reviews in kind of news sites and product review sites said, oh, we can't believe that these guys are doing this for free. Everybody else is charging it, but it's amazing, you can kind of get it for free there. So we got a lot of really, really good press about that. And it was, yeah, fine, I can offer it for free, Google is paying for that. So, finally we get something back from Google. But we were able to turn this thing into a competitive advantage. So, there's a lot of research that's gone into this in other industries. And for example, I found a Russian civil engineer that discovered lean startup about 150 years ago. So he wrote about these big projects in civil engineering, in architecture and things like that, and talked about how these projects always fail because of linear planning. Because people do plans expecting that nothing outside of their control is going to happen while they're delivering, and how those plans tend to fail because there are 3 unpredictable dimensions that do not depend on you. They depend on Google, they depend on Russians, they depend on the competition, they do not depend on us, so we can't plan for that. And he identified those 3 dimensions that kind of typically kill linear plans. So, kind of the 3 dimensions that he identified, the first one is the local dimension, where something might work really, really well in one locality or on one platform, but just does not translate that well to something else. And for example, you can do something that works really, really well on the desktop, but the whole usage on mobile is completely different. Or for this collaboration tool, one day we suddenly started getting a ton of errors from Spain. Our software is not localized at all. So there should be no difference between different countries, but from Spain, we were getting a ton of errors. We have error measurements in production, so anytime an error happens, we get an email. He said, okay, there's some local thing here that we don't understand. I couldn't plan for this. And what happened is, Google introduced automatic translation in Chrome, so people could just click on a button and translate web pages. And we were using button labels to make some decisions in the code. And Spanish people have those weird question marks. One of them is upside down. That's not an ASCII character, it's a Unicode character that completely broke our code when Google translated that. If I was the smartest person in the world, I could have planned for that. But I'm stupid, so, local things happen. And that's where kind of we are either going to spend a ton of time predicting all possible local things ever, or we will be good in detecting when something unexpected happens locally and act on that. So the second dimension that this guy is talking about is a time-based dimension, where he says, you can start doing something, but on any longer-term project, on anything that can be slightly longer, other things will happen without your control. Google does something. Your competitors come up with a new product or something like that. At the moment, I'm working on something we thought was really, really innovative, and we were going to have a big release and a big news announcement in about 3 months when we finish it. And I just got an email from one of our competitors announcing pretty much the same thing. So, the surprise factor is not going to be there in 3 months. Unexpected things happen in terms of time. So, The third dimension that Peter Palczynski talks about is the human dimension. He says humans are unpredictable. They can use your software the way you want them, or they can abuse it, they can misuse it, they can use it for completely different purposes, and things like anybody who's ever done any UX testing pretty much knows this. And one of the best lessons for that is in a book called What Customers Want by Anthony Ulrich. Anthony Ulrich talks about, he was the program manager for PC Junior at IBM. PC Junior is famous for being the second worst product launch in history. They wasted about $2 billion on building a product that was built according to client specifications that nobody wanted to buy. Humans are unpredictable. So, we kind of, Palczynski formulated 3 principles that allow organizations to actually benefit from this stuff. He formulated 3 principles for planning how organizations can not just suffer when something like this happens, but actually turn it into a competitive advantage and be better than the competition there. And the 3 key principles are, the first one is variation, which is basically, we don't really know what's going to work, what's not going to work. Because of the local human time-based dimensions, we cannot plan for it. So the best thing we can do is try out lots of options and look at our plans as options, as things that might or might not work, and kind of try out lots of new things. So some of them will work better than expected, some of them will work much worse than expected. And the only thing we can do is basically try out lots of things. The second one is try those things out on a scale that is survivable. Don't try those things out on a scale of 2 years of development where if it fails, everything is gone and we have to cancel the project. Try those things out on a scale that we will be able to survive. The last one is selection, which is kind of make sure we know how to decide which one of these actually succeeded and which one of these actually failed. So be able to detect failure, be able to detect success, and make those decisions quickly. So Palczynski says that if we can include those 3 aspects in our plans, we will be able to benefit from flexible planning. Now, this is where kind of we have a problem with the current way of doing plans in software, because we just don't do things like that. A lot of our plans are completely different. And the kind of the user stories that are typically in this format are the key cause of the problem. Most organizations think that by doing user stories like this, we are actually doing flexible planning, and we're not. We are ending up in the stream of consciousness that avoids the big picture, that creates this whole kind of danger of flexible planning, and then business people won't want this kind of fall. Now, we can fix user stories. And the funny thing is we can fix user stories by no more than 10 minutes per story. So what I want to give you today is a Jedi mind trick you can play on people that's going to take no more than 10 minutes per story. And that's going to fix stories like this for you, so your organization can actually benefit from Agile. And kind of the first problem that we have is there is no big picture. With things like this, kind of, they get put into Jira, there's 500 of them, but business people generally do not care about that. All the business people in all organizations I've ever worked with don't care about user stories. What they care about is what is in PowerPoint. What you need to look for is some PowerPoint document somewhere, because PowerPoint documents like this are typically what business people care about. Now, documents like this people call roadmaps. This says roadmap.pdf in the URL, so it's a roadmap. It's not a particularly good roadmap, and kind of one of the most interesting things about this one is it's for Adobe Code Fusion. It's pretty much something that, if you tried to invent something as bad as this, you couldn't. Because it has all the typical crap it's mobile, it's enterprise, it's professional, it's cloud, it's enterprise, and everything is great. And this is kind of where most of the plans the business people have, kind of that where the money is really involved, are like this. Now, has anybody done web development in the 90s? Do you have anybody who's done so? There's a couple. Do you remember Cold Fusion in the 90s? Cold Fusion was pretty much the best technology of the day. Everybody, all the cool kids were using Cold Fusion. Everything was really, really great about that. Cold Fusion today is a uniquely irrelevant product. I like to think about that transformation from the most successful product to the uniquely relevant product, because they're doing roadmaps like this. So what Palczynski is basically talking about is these are not roadmaps, because there are no options there. There are no survivable experiments there. There is no way to select errors. There is no way to detect if we made the wrong decision. There is no way to detect if something unexpected happened on human, local, or time-based dimension while delivering this. And the kind of what Palczynski is talking about is kind of these things are roadmaps, not these things. The trick is in the name. This is a map of roads. It's a road map. If I start on one end and I want to go to the other end, I have lots of options. If one of these bridges is blocked because there is a strike, that's not a problem at all. We can just go around. It's okay. If what the strike is here and nobody knows about the strike and all our competitors are stuck there, we can basically rush through another bridge. That's fine. We can turn this into a competitive advantage. And the really, really important thing about roadmaps like this is they give us lots and lots of options. Imagine a roadmap of Bordeaux where only one road was drawn. That wouldn't be that particularly useful. And we as the kind of agile community, as software professionals, we need to start helping business people create roadmaps like this. Now, the problem with this is these things are not that easy to use, or they were not that easy to use about 10, 15 years ago. So what used to happen 10, 15 years ago is people would pretty much do water scrum forward planning with these roadmaps. What we would do is we would plan everything up front, then we'd kind of start driving and get some feedback, and kind of when we mess up, we really, really mess up. I don't know about you guys, but kind of I never learned how to drive. That's one of my kind of failures in life. And my wife drives. So what we used to do with this is, if we're going somewhere, especially if it's in an unknown country, we would kind of plot our journey completely. And because these maps are big, you'd have to kind of list in a small book, because you can't open a big map while in a car. So I try kind of to read the map and I jump between pages, and it's difficult to navigate. And then about half an hour later, we start arguing who is a moron for not knowing how to read the map, and who is an idiot for missing a turn that clearly said, you should take this turn. And then kind of after fighting for a while, we need to stop, we need to get the coffee, calm down, replan, and start again. This is what is Scrum for. Now, about 10 years ago, we bought a marriage-saving device. And we stopped arguing. We bought this. And this solved all our marriage problems. I recommend this, as a marriage-saving device. It's great. Because you no longer have to fight. So, what this thing does for us is, I no longer have to read the map at all. Somebody else reads it. And if she misses a turn, it's not a problem at all. TomTom replans, magically. And we don't have to blame anybody anymore. And if something unexpected happens, we just tell TomTom, hey, the road is blocked, find another way. And that's okay. So lots of software organizations are in a similar situation where somebody comes up with a big bug, then developers start running, testers start measuring that, and then we start arguing who is an idiot for not knowing how to understand requirements, who's a moron for not knowing how to measure it, and then at some point everything explodes and people get angry and typically blame testers for the whole thing, because testers are the easiest to blame. And this is a very, very destructive kind of situation. So we need a marriage-saving device for our software teams. and we need something like this. So the big challenge is, how do we create a GPS for our software? And that's my challenge to you today. And GPS has a couple of things that are really interesting there. GPS has a map, kind of pretty much the same map as this. So there's lots of options there, but options are not what makes GPS particularly useful, because we had that before. And anybody can come up with a ton of options. This is Bordeaux, there's some really good wine here. We can, drink a couple of bottles of wine. We can come up with 5 million options under the influence of alcohol. Not a problem at all. Coming up with options is easy. The difficult part is this stuff here. The difficult part is the turn-by-turn navigation that tells us, hey, the next turn is in 40 meters and it looks like this. So you know up front that you need to take the turn. You can kind of visualize where the turn is. And also, if you miss the turn, it's not a big problem, because it magically replans for you. And it's going to detect it really, really quickly that you missed the turn. The critical problem we have in software is, if we miss a turn, we just kind of continue, and then we realize 6 months later that we missed the turn. If a GPS was reporting half an hour later on the fact that you missed the turn, it would be useless. So we need to have a way to quickly detect that we have missed the turn or made the turn, so we can do turn-by-turn navigation. And the other thing that GPS has that maps don't have is this part here, which is telling us, hey, it's going to take you 20 more minutes to get to the map, to the center, so you can plan up front. If there's something unexpected happening on the road and you're blocked, and the other one is 3 hours longer, you can call up front and you can say, look, sorry, I'm not coming there. Or you can say, oh, I found a faster way, I'll be there early, make me some coffee and things like that. So we can plan up front. And if we are able to create this for our software, then we can magically do away with what is come for. And that's the challenge for kind of you today. So user stories are pretty good at doing that, but we have to fix them. User stories could be our turn-by-turn navigation. They could be, but for most of the teams they are not. And that's where we need to fix them. So in order to fix them, one good idea is, let's try to apply the kind of 3 Palczynski principles to user stories. And kind of the first one is kind of variation. And variation basically translated to software means we need to plan to learn. We need to plan that not all user stories will be successful. They might be implemented correctly from a technical perspective. The unit tests, acceptance tests, usability tests might pass, but it might be a bad business idea. And we need to plan for user stories that are not necessarily going to be successful. If all your user stories are always successful, you're not experimenting enough. You're not benefiting from the ability to do flexible scope. So, kind of, the context-driven, so the design thinking community talks a lot about 2 different phases in plans. They talk about a divergent phase where you need to create lots of options, and then the convergent phase where we need to start selecting options. Where in software plans, most of the time there's only one way of delivering stuff. It's very linear. We don't really have a way to generate lots of options and select. And what the design thinking community talks about quite a lot is analysis happens here. The purpose of analysis is to select between options, not to analyze one option to death and then figure out that kind of business people don't really know what they want. And the design thinking community talks about, if all you have is one option, it's pointless to do analysis, because then the only thing you can do is figure out whether you've understood this thing correctly. Or that you're not benefiting from being able to deliver flexible stuff. You're not reacting to unexpected things. So generally, what this means for user stories is user stories are options. We need to start approaching user stories when talking to business as option. Hey, we can do this, we can do that. We can do this, we can do that. Some of it will be competing. If I do this, I no longer have to do that. Or some of it will actually be insufficient. Hey, we might do all this and still miss the whole target. So we need to come up with lots and lots of options. That kind of leads us to the second Paczynski principle, which is selection. We need to be able to detect when a user story was actually a good idea, when a user story wasn't a good idea. And this is where we start getting into trouble, because user stories are uniquely bad for this stuff. The idea with the user story like this is for this part to give us some kind of business context. So the magic around good idea or bad idea is supposed to be there. Now, the problem with this is there's nothing telling us when the user story completes, was it successful or not? Because in most cases, this person was able to monitor the inventory before the user story was done. They can go to the warehouse and count the boxes. They can look at the legacy system. After the user story is done, they are also able to monitor the inventory. So, what have we done? And Anthony Ulrich's lesson from the IBM PC Junior product that he described in what customers want is that plans that are focused on features are destined to fail. Because we just talk about features, there's nothing really to measure there, there's no way to decide if it is successful or not until it fails miserably. And he said that what we should be focusing on is causing changes in how people work. Causing changes in people's behavior. So a product is valuable if it causes a change in the way how somebody works. If we do this and nothing changes, we've wasted time. And we can use this idea, so the 10-minute fix for the stories, whenever you get a story like this, that talks essentially about a behavior or a job type or something like that, ask the following question. How will this person be able to do this differently once a user story is done? What is the difference there? And then people are going to come back and say, more accurately. You say, more accurately, really? So the current system is not accurate enough. Oh, no, it's accurate. Okay, so why are we doing this? Cheaper? Really? In what way? Well, we will not need as many people. Okay, so you're going to fire the people. No, not really. Okay, so why are we doing this? Faster. Okay, faster. So now we have something that we can measure. We can see whether a user story was a good idea or not. We can do this user story and we can see if people are actually monitoring their inventory faster. If yes, this was a good idea. If no, something unexpected happened. A human dimension, a local dimension, a time-based dimension caused something unexpected to happen. We did not make the next turn. And now the question is, hey, stop, replan, find something else. Or redo this or improve this. So the nice thing about changes, approaching user stories, behavior changes, is when you have a change, it's very, very easy to ask the next question. So it's going to take 5 minutes for the first one, it's going to take 5 minutes for the second question, and as soon as you have a change, the second question is going to be by how much? How much faster? 10%, 5 million %, 20%, half a minute faster, so we can set some kind of measurable acceptance criteria on this from a business perspective. So, the key lesson there is that user stories really need to be about behavior changes. If you're not describing a behavior change in a user story, you will not be able to measure success or failure. So, that leads us to the third Paczynski principle. And the third Paczynski principle is basically do this on a scale that is survivable. Plan not to kill the company if something doesn't work out. We know that Google might do something, the Russians might do something, who knows what's going to happen. Let's do this on a scale that's not going to kill the company. And this is the really interesting part where most software teams struggle with selling user stories to their business. We try to sell user stories by saying, oh, this needs to be small because it needs to fit into a sprint. What the business people hear is blah, 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 technical stuff. I don't care. User stories don't need to be small to fit into a sprint. User stories need to be small so we can survive this experiment. So the key question about a user story is how much are you willing to bet that this is a good idea? Do you want to bet more than 2 weeks of work? Do you want to bet more than 1 day of work? Do you want to how much do you want to bet that this is a really good idea? So in order to do that, we need to start creating some kind of a connection between user stories and the value that they need to provide. And this value typically is going to happen on several levels. So instead of doing something like this, that's basically just a list, we need to start creating hierarchical backlogs. We need to start creating backlogs that put a user story into a perspective of some larger software change idea, that is put into a perspective of some business change, that's put into a perspective of some kind of high-level goal. So we can now say, okay, this is very, very risky because unexpected things might happen there. How much are you willing to bet that this software change is actually going to help you there? Well, let's take something small, put it in. We have a capability of not making big bets. You as an organization have a capability of a software team delivering iteratively, which means you can make small bets. And this is where we go to kind of the benefit from Agile. You can go to the business and say, look, you don't have to make these massive bets. We are capable of delivering something every 2 weeks. So how about we do a small experiment? And you can learn from that experiment, so you can have a survivable experiment about an option for some kind of flexible scope, and then you can plan better. And if we do that, we can start doing the GPS. We can start using user stories as a turn-by-turn navigation, and because we do small experiments, we can measure the small experiments on kind of the behavior change, and we can see if we made the next turn or not. And if yes, we cannot do something else. If not, we continue improving it. And if we start organizing this thing as a hierarchy, we start creating a map of options. We start creating a map of roads. Imagine we have, for this business change, we have these software change ideas, we have all of these user stories, and this is about making somebody do something 10% faster. Imagine that we do just this user story and they already do it 10% faster. Should we still go and deliver everything else? Probably not. I mean, we can give business people that feedback report and say, look, we've achieved what you want to achieve. We can move on to something else. This road was much better than we expected. Or we do half of this and it doesn't really move this thing at all. Then we can say, look, this road is blocked. So by putting this thing into a perspective, we can start reporting on a much better idea. So there's 2 good strategies for doing this. We don't really have time to go in detail, but I'll give you references where to look for them. So one strategy is called impact mapping. And impact mapping is a visualization of assumptions as code that's pretty much creating a roadmap like that. The other strategy is called user story mapping by Jeff Patton. That's creating a hierarchical backlog as a table where you put user stories in the perspective of user journeys, and kind of we can start looking at options and things like that. And kind of the key conclusion from this is kind of we need to start changing the way how we approach user stories. And good user stories are essentially experiments, survivable experiments about some potential options that we are going to cause some behavior changes. If we approach user stories as kind of tiny elements of scope or functionality that we want to deliver, we have already failed. And the organizations will not benefit from Agile. If we approach user stories as options for survivable experiments for kind of behavior changes, then these things become the turn-by-turn navigation in our software. So there's a couple of strategies about this, and I said, I've mentioned 2 of them. We had a meeting in February last year with several people who do things in this area and we'll use to decide what we're going to do next. Because unexpected things will happen. Something is going to work out much better than we expect. Some things are going to work out much worse than we expect. For example, with this collaboration tool, we had a milestone that said we have to increase the number of users dramatically. And 2 weeks after we started, we got an email from a professor at the university said, why have you done your software so stupidly? I have to add all my 600 students manually. So what are you talking about? And he said, well, I need to approve each of my 600 students manually. This is stupid. And what we've actually done is we've enabled Google Drive integration, which we thought would be normal for a person. You know, I go there, I use the software, it says, you know, would you like to use Google Drive? Yes, you continue. Universities don't do it like that. With universities, the administrator of the organization, the professor, has to approve all the students manually. So this email basically gave us something unexpected. It took 2 seconds to find the checkbox in Google Drive configuration to allow a professor to add all his students automatically. And all of a sudden, we had 20,000 more users overnight, and kind of that thing started increasing. We achieved a milestone much better than we expected. We stopped delivering software. So real use is really, really important. And the last principle that these people talk about is how by doing these things, kind of all these strategies get people to care. Everybody starts caring about outcomes and impacts. People stop caring that much about delivering features. So, kind of, that's my message today, and I hope I've challenged your thinking at least a bit. All these things are kind of described slightly more in my latest book that's called 50 Quick Ideas to Improve User Stories. As a small present for spending an hour with me, I'll give you the book for free. So, if you go to this URL, it will automatically apply a discount that makes the book free. So you can download that. Thank you very much for your time. I hope I've challenged your thinking at least a bit. Thank you.
Si vous avez une ou deux questions pour Gojko avant qu'on passe à autre chose, n'hésitez pas.
Thank you for I just have one question. I think it's your question. When you have a customer that just wants the answer how much this software will cost me and when will I get it, I can try all my best to say, your question is irrelevant. But yet I have to make a
Why is the question irrelevant? That's a very good question. I mean, it's a fantastically important question. So most people want to know how much something is going to cost and when they will get it. But software is the only thing we buy by kind of doing this. So you think about this. From very, very cheap things, like an ice cream, to very, very expensive things like a house. What you buy is, you go somewhere and you think about, oh, I have this much money, and these are the kind of things I really need from that, and this is when I need it. And then you choose the best possible option. So if I want to buy an ice cream, kind of, I don't really care what kind of chocolate it has inside, I just want chocolate and I want it to be cold. It can't be melted, and I'm not going to pay more than €5 for it. So if somebody offers me an ice cream with €50, I'm going to, it has to be one good ice cream for that. But so software is the only thing we buy where people say, look, I'm not really sure what I want. I might change my opinion of what I want later, but how much is it going to cost? And when do I get it? You know, give me a detailed estimate. So my strategy for dealing with that is I say, well, we have lots of options. I can give you different options, but kind of how much money do you want to spend and when do you want it by? If it's now, we'll have to improvise lots of things. If you can wait for 6 months, we can do it properly. If you want it in 3 months, we can't really deliver everything, we can kind of fudge it. And it's going to cost you this much, it's going to cost you that much. So what I try to do is I get people to start thinking about options. And then the price and the time become an architectural constraint. Very, very much like the number of users you want to support or the kind of the design of the system. That's just a constraint. That's a box within which we need to come up with a good solution. And then we work, you know, we got some options and we work towards that flexible scope kind of to satisfy the options. I want to deliver an ice cream that's cold and it has chocolate. Kind of, if it's blue or red or kind of has this or that thing, or it's not that relevant. It's kind of whatever we can do in that in that time box. So I try and invert the question and give people about, let's start with the budget, and then you don't need to estimate because hey, there's your budget, and you can spend 10% of the budget, and you can say, hey, we're already there. Do you want to spend the rest of your budget wasting money, or do you want to do something else? Or you can spend 10% of the budget and say, hey, we thought this is going to happen, but, we're not really making people monitor the inventory faster. Something unexpected is going on. Maybe we should change the plan. So I try and get people to start thinking about options and then start reporting on outcomes and impacts and start focusing on outcomes and impacts rather than software features.
Une autre question? Et après, on va pouvoir mettre sur le... Bon.
Ok, merci.